G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. We'll have all the show notes and any resources mentioned in the cast on our website. In 2007, just before the GFC hit, David left Starward Distillery in Tasmania to set up his visionary Australian whisky distillery in Melbourne, breaking many traditions in the nascent but by then 15-year-old craft distilling industry in the country. It took David 3 years to raise all the funds to set up the distillery and get production underway. It was clear the business model was for a quality sub-$100 bottle of whiskey that lives in the sharing cabinet of a whiskey drinker, launching at $75 on the shelves in early 2013 when all other Australian whiskies were double the price. In that first year, they sold less than 2,700 bottles, and in 2020 will move 120,000, with enough stock going into casks each year for close to 1 million bottles or $22 million excise tax bill per annum. From 1 FTE in 2007 to now 35 and production capacity about to expand again, David has valued highly the key team members he brought along the journey, starting with his first hire who's still there 10 years after production began. Funding from investors and selling whiskey investment casks helped get the business through fast growth, tough times, and be well positioned for the world's largest alcohol company with 18,000 sales reps in the USA alone to invest in late 2015. That blue chip investment helped them move to larger premises, increase production tenfold, and get serious about export. David believes the hardest thing in growing a small business is letting go. And advice he'd give himself on day one is, keep going. It's going to take a lot longer than you think, but you should still do it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing David Vitale from Starward Distillery in Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for your time today, David.
Thanks a lot. It's a privilege to be on the show, actually.
And you're actually now based in Seattle, where Holly, your wife, is originally from. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, actually, she grew up in Tasmania. Was born in Tasmania and spent the first 10 years of her life in Tassie, and then they're two American parents and Mum and Dad kind of had a wave of kind of nostalgia come upon them, I guess, and they moved the family with 4 kids back to the Pacific Northwest, just north of Seattle. So she's spent as much time in Australia as we met in Australia, so she's spent as much time in Australia as she has Seattle.
Great, yeah. And it's a beautiful spot. I was there a couple of years ago, Seattle. But you're now living, 30-minute boat ride out of Seattle on an island?
Yeah, it's a ferry ride just off Elliott Bay, straight across. It's an island called Bainbridge Island. And yeah, it's pretty. It's lots of parks. It's the size of Manhattan, but with 20,000 people, which...
Wow, compared to 12 million. Yeah.
Yeah, at last count was like 2 blocks of, the Lower East Side. So, it's not dense at all. And, it's quite deliberate for us to find a place that wasn't comparable to Melbourne, because I just keep complaining about things.
I'm sure you wouldn't be able to find any coffee comparable to Melbourne over there.
No, but I can find pizza that is world class on the island. It's kind of just...
Really?
I thought it was candid camera. So, I walked into this place and they've got an amazing back bar, amazing Italian amari, true Neapolitan style wood-fired pizzas, and just a neighborhood pizza joint that's just amazing.
Well, with your Sicilian background, I assume that you'd be very hard on any coffee that passes your lips over there.
Yeah, I kind of have reverted to cold brew most of the time. But I can dial in, having said that, at a Starbucks coffee. And
oh my God, really? Oh,
yeah.
I'm shuddering right now. Jeez.
No, it's a triple tall blonde latte, warm on the milk.
Right. Okay.
That's the trick, right? Warm milk, blonde beans, and a triple shot.
Right.
And it's a very close approximation to a mediocre Melbourne coffee.
Got it. Let's start with how we know each other. I was thinking about this the other day on a bushwalk. I think the first time I met you, it's a mutual friend of ours, Greg Ramsey, otherwise known as Rambo, who's mentioned quite a bit in our casts. We know quite a lot of mutual friends. But I think the first time we actually met, Greg rang me up and said, this would have been 10 years ago, or 8, 9, 10 years ago, was Easter, I think, and you needed a lift out at the airport, and Greg couldn't do it for some reason. So I picked you up from somewhere from the hotel and dropped you out at the airport, and we sat in the Qantas lounge for a bit and had a chat. I think that was the first time we met.
I think you're right. I was thinking about that too. It was definitely in Tassie, and we just kind of immediately connected, both in terms of like obviously the whiskey side of things and your involvement in whiskey, but also just high growth startups. And
yes.
This being my third go round, we had a lot of stories to share and insights that are kind of like bounce off. And particularly in that small business segment where you're thinking about moving beyond say 5 employees to and I guess mortgaging the house, or like putting stakes in the ground that can kind of be a bit more substantial. There aren't that many businesses, they're either really big businesses, government, or really small businesses in Tasmania. So
yeah,
I think we kind of connected really quickly.
Yeah, I remember that conversation. Yeah, we hit it off, and it just seemed like a natural connection. And we obviously kept up the communications over the years. You were in Melbourne, now you're in Seattle. We caught up in London late last year for the whiskey show, and then Paris. They were some very late nights.
They were, and some very good Thai as well.
Yes. Oh, well, let's tell the audience a bit about your business, about Starward.
Yeah, so Starward Distillery was founded in 2007, and I guess at that point in time, Australia's whiskey credentials were really anchored in Tasmania. There are a few mainland distilleries, Lime Burners and Bakery Hill, but really Tassie had kind of made its mark as the place where single malt whiskey was made, and I was really captivated by it, so much so that I figured that I'd kind of ask one of the distillers to give me a job and learn how to make whiskey, which was Bill Lark.
Yeah.
He's kind of the founding father of the modern craft spirits movement in Australia. I mean, a lot of people say founding father of the whiskey movement, but really we wouldn't have a craft spirits industry if it weren't for Bill. And he's,
he's known as the godfather of Australian whiskey. I think he's the only person in the Southern Hemisphere inducted into the Whiskey Hall of Fame in London, actually.
Yeah,
and Patrick Maguire last year from Sullivan's Cove as well, yeah.
That's right. But very early on, I think that was probably, 2008 or 9? So
Bill was inducted in 2015.
Oh, really?
Yep. So 2014 or 15, when I was still at Lark, it happened, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess what captivated me about whiskey at that point in time was, like, I was a home brewer. I loved making way more beer than I could drink for myself. And I didn't really realize that whiskey was effectively just a distilled beer. Particularly malt whiskeys are just malted barley, yeast, and water.
What do they say? Whiskey's what beer wants to be when it grows up.
Grows up, yeah. And so for me, that was kind of a lightning bolt moment that, I could take a craft beer approach to whiskey production and start thinking about it and flavor, not just as what comes out of the barrel, because the prevailing convention is that 70 to 80% of the whiskey's flavor comes from the cask, but actually we can influence this right from the beginning.
Yep.
So, and it'd be fair to say, well, this was on one of the Tasmanian websites. I won't name names. We make Tasmanian whiskey in the finest of Scottish traditions, and it's still on the internet time machine if you ever want to go back and look. Yeah. So it's not me making it up. But the point being that, like, I just didn't understand why anyone would want to buy a whiskey from someplace else than Scotland that's made in the finest of the Scottish traditions.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, agree.
And so for me, if we were going to do this, it needed to be a modern whiskey that reflected Australia and all of its diversity, the way that we kind of have this ability to, marry old and new together and come up with something distinctly our own. And we see it all the time in cuisine. And that was my biggest inspiration, was to think about how we could create a modern Australian whiskey that really celebrated the place that it was made, just like those great distilleries around the world do.
Yep.
And often we think of
Providence.
that. Often we think of that in terms of the place and flavor and the ingredients. Most notably the smoky whiskies from the island of Isla.
Yep.
But I think, Troy, that it also, the best of those whiskies talk to the culture of the place they're made as much as they do the ingredients. And so when we started Starward, it was with this idea of a modern Australian whiskey that talked to the place it's made. All of the ingredients for Starward are less than a day's drive away from the distillery door. And but importantly, the culture of Melbourne, this inclusive, diverse, food-centric, food-obsessed city that has benefited from, a number of generations of migration.
Yes.
And you see that in all parts of life. And so particularly in cuisine, and that was something that inspired me to think, well, why can't I take a little bit of Scotland, Ireland, Kentucky, Australia, and create something that can only be made in Melbourne.
Yeah. So that was 2007. Can we just go back a step? Because I'm kind of fishing for a great story that Bill tells. I don't know if we're going to edit this out if you're not happy to talk about how you actually kind of got the momentum, let's call it, to move from Tassie to Melbourne to.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Bill and Lynn Lark were really generous in terms of giving me an opportunity to learn how to make whiskey. And
because you worked at Lark there for a few years, didn't you, as the business BDM?
From 2005 to 2007, April 2007.
Yeah.
As was I, generous in terms of helping them scale their business up. Because at that point in time, it was very, whiskey availability was infrequent. There was a wait list. It was still in the olive oil bottles. They really didn't have to work all that hard to sell the product because of its quality and availability.
Yes, very small volumes, yeah.
But it was tough going. It was still hand to mouth.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to save your way to consistent supply of whiskey reinvesting profits from whiskey sales into more whiskey. That'll take you a generation.
Yes.
And so we looked at innovative ways to fund that. And given my background in financial services, I helped formulate one of the first barrel investment programs that enabled people to help support the distillery by investing in a parcel of whiskey that the distillery would then buy back at the end of the period.
Yeah, it's a cask investment program. Yeah.
Yeah, for a fixed
financial,
so,
as a financial product. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were able to effectively scale up production, get the cost of goods down, and really start to motor along and recruit some salespeople. It was really a good time, and we could see the fruits of all of that hard work starting to pay off. This was phase 1 of 5 in my mind of what I thought the Lark Distillery could be.
Yep.
But it quickly became apparent to me that, my version of what the potential of Lark Distillery could be and Bill and Lynn's version of what the potential of Lark Distillery could be in the time frame that I'd established were very, very different.
Was it Bill told me? Bill tells me the story. Was it a few days before you and Bill were meant to get on a plane to the US to talk to a potential importer? You'd had a conversation a few days before, and he literally said the day before. How did that go?
Yeah, so I was basically my George Bush moment, I call it, because we went into a boardroom and said, you're either with me or you're against me in terms of this business plan that I'd established. And Bill and Lynn were one step ahead of me, I think, and said, well, no, we think this is a smashing idea, but not for us. We think you should do it. And so I still worked with them for a period of time while we raised capital to establish what's become Starward. And, they with their blessing, we were able to set it up. And in fact, they were founding investors in the distillery. So without their support, both in terms of learning what to do and importantly what not to do, but also just that moral encouragement of kind of, you've got this, you can do it, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I think that's
and
great.
That's not an uncommon story. Bill's been, almost to his detriment, very, very, very generous with his time.
Absolutely. He's instrumental to the whole industry pretty much in Australia. He's been very supportive and giving, and that famous phrase of his, on a rising tide, all boats will float.
Lift,
But yeah, I think that's very good of both Bill and Lynn to recognise that your hunger and vision was very much different to theirs, and not only say it's not for us, but say we'll help you, we'll support you until you get up on your feet in Melbourne and do whatever we can to get Starward off the ground.
Yeah. So that was in April 2007, and by June we raised the first round of capital.
Great.
And that was great. We could have raised 10 times as much more. I don't know why I didn't take the money. And then the global financial crisis arrived, and every day I was wishing I'd taken more.
Yeah.
But we went into a bit of a, similar to what's going on now in the first half of 2020, bit of a hibernation mode, and started to really think about whether this idea of a modern whiskey unshackled from tradition, almost the antithesis of what the Tasmanian industry had kind of built at a really sharp price point, an accessible price point, was the right way to go. But to me, I could have built a different business, and sometimes wonder why I didn't. But I could have built a different business at a $150 or $200 price point, and but it wasn't what got me out of bed every day. This idea that we could have something, an Australian whiskey in the sharing cabinet to share with the world, was a really important driver for me. And there's no greater satisfaction for me now walking into a bar. I have no idea whether it has Starward or not, and then there I look on the back bar, and this is in Seattle, and there it is.
Right.
It's such a wonderful gift that I've been able to give myself in that way. People,
for context to those people not in the whiskey industry, particularly Australia, and the timing wise, obviously it was 2014, March 2014, when Sullivan's Cove won Best Single Malt in the world. That really set off the year before Cavalier won it. So those two whiskies were the first non-Scotch or Japanese or Irish to win it. Correct me if I'm wrong. So they started to really put this stamp out on whiskey that it can be made outside of those traditional homes. So New World whiskey really started to take off from that point. So Australian whiskey was really nothing to be heard of back in 2007.
A modern Australian whiskey for the world is even more kind of audacious.
Yes.
In that context.
And so for context, your pricing model, you were seen as quite a rebel, I guess, in the Australian whiskey industry at the time, because you were talking about sub $100 price point on a bottle, whereas most of the whiskies were made in Tasmania, obviously, apart from lime burners in Western Australia, and they were all $150 to $200 a bottle. And people would look at you and go, well, you're mad. Why are you going to waste
$79. And it was really a rational conversation with myself and what I wanted to have, a conversation that I wanted to have with our drinkers, which is like, the whiskeys that have inspired me are all sub $100 whiskeys.
You can get a great Scotch, and for those who don't know, you can only call a Scotch if the whiskey's made in Scotland for $60 to $80 a bottle in Australia.
So how on earth was I ever going to convince one of those $60 to $80 whiskey drinkers, Scotch drinkers, to consider Starward if it's double the price of something that they already know, is well accoladed and has 150 years worth of history?
So, and I think another strategic move early on was just your vision for the scale of the business as well, because apart from Hellier's Road and also in Tasmania, who've got quite a big capacity, there was no one else really of that size with the quality in Australia.
No, it was a balls deep move, right? Like, and part of that was two parts. The first is economies of scale. Like, distilleries work good when they're running hot, and our stills were on for 21 out of 24 hours a day, 3 shifts, 1 hour to turn them round. Like, they were always on. And
which is also at the time very unheard of. I mean, Heliers Road, I think they only ran their still once a week. I mean, it's 30,000 litre, but it's,
once a week. In Hobart, most of them were running maybe twice or three times a week, and that was a busy week. And we were, so those 3 times a week were 3 batches, and we were doing 3 batches in a day.
Wow.
So that kind of gives you, we were 7 times the scale and operating kind of capacity of the cohort that existed at that point in time, and to the point at which it was like, are you sure there are going to be enough people to drink all that whiskey? And like, I mean, I can't take credit for saying that this is something, I told you so, like, of course, but we have ridden the most, golden era of whiskey discovery ever known to man. So timing was great, and so it was a scale exercise, but it was also thinking beyond beyond the boundaries of Australia as a nation, to the United States, to Europe, to Asia, and thinking about just the potential for an Australian whiskey and how it might well be perceived in those countries. And if you take an optimistic view of that, then, as we ran out, that 7 times production was just nowhere near enough.
Yep. Yeah, that is a great problem to have.
Yeah. So we started production in January 2010. So it took us the better part of 2.5 years really to raise the capital, to finalize the business plan, to get the investment model, the financing structure up and running, and then we just basically full tilted production until we ran out of money, Troy.
Yes, I remember this chapter.
Yeah, and that was 2013. So we just launched the brand Starward, and to great traction. I mean, looking back at that point in time, there's a lot of goodwill shown towards the product. Consumers' natural instinct is, well, if this is half the price of the next alternative,
what's wrong with it?
Australian whiskey, there must be something wrong with it.
Yeah.
And that perception took about 2.5 to 3 years, a couple of gold medals, international gold medals, and best in category, so beating those $150 whiskeys.
Yes.
To kind of disabuse, like, no. My mantra really was, look, in the world of whiskey, when you're paying more than $100, you're paying for scarcity or marketing, or a bit of both.
Yeah.
You're not paying for quality.
Yeah.
And that's a very rational conversation to have with an emotional audience, but we got there in the end. But through that period of launch, I kind of used to brush my teeth in the morning in 2011 and 12, and just say to myself, I just need to get to market, and then things will be easier, because it was pretty hard going, just slogging it out. We didn't have a gin. We didn't have any other spirits that we used to fund the distillery. We were a pure whiskey play.
I think that's an important point to make, because a lot of distilleries, especially the Tasmanian ones, just made anything they could. One, because they felt they could sell everything to everyone, but also for that cash cow of the gin, waiting for their whiskey, because in Australia you need at least 2 years in casks to legally call it whiskey. In UK and Europe it's 3 years. But that's another point I just want to quickly touch on. So you started the stills up in 2010, early 2010, but you had to then wait, 3 years before your whiskey was ready for market? Yeah. So 3 years, no cash coming in, no sales. Yeah.
No. And an idea, like an idea of how we were going to sell the whiskey, which was antithetical to any other kind of reference point in the market, certainly in the craft space.
Yeah.
So, you can imagine my trepidation and excitement in February of 2013 launching this product, only to then realize that, for every dollar we were earning, we were spending about $1.20 in marketing to build the brand. And on top of that, we had excise, which, at our price point was about 40% of the cost.
Yeah, Australia's the fourth highest tax on spirits in the world at $86 a lal. So it's about $25 in a 700ml bottle of 40% alcohol in Australia.
Yeah. So we were selling our whiskey to our distributor for $28.
Yeah.
Then there'd be $25 worth of tax added. And then there'd be the distributor margin,
plus
the
GST.
retailer margin, and GST.
Yep.
So between GST and the excise,
about $30 a bottle.
Yeah. I mean, the government has been the biggest beneficiary of Starward's success.
Yes. I remember I remember just soon after I finished at Lark, August 2015, I was out on a run with my dog in the bush, and you rang me and we were having a chat, and you told me how many Laos pure liters of pure alcohol you'd laid down that financial year. It was 250,000 Laos, I think. And I quickly did the math and said, holy fuck, David, that is a $22 million excise bill right there.
Yeah. So we basically had locked in $22 million worth of tax revenue for the government.
That's right. Yeah.
And I don't say that begrudgingly. I mean, all whiskies have got that same challenge. All spirits have the same challenge. It's frustrating, but it's the same. It's a leveler in a way. And perversely, at our price point and premium price points, it actually makes the differential between a pretty good whiskey and a local whiskey that's pretty good too, maybe $10.
Yeah.
A difference. And so people are happy to spend the extra $10.
Yep.
If you rip out excise and there's $35 worth of difference, all of a sudden the equation becomes a little bit more difficult to prosecute.
Yep.
The big challenge for us is that we're missing out on wine drinkers and beer drinkers that would probably drink more spirits if they were priced at the same level.
Yep.
So I'm all for a very high tax rate, but I think it should be universally applied to wine and beer, and so it's fair for everybody, because someone still hasn't tried to explain to me why a barley farmer who makes a ton of barley for us to malt and turn into whiskey is taxed $32,000 of excise, but a grape producer is taxed, depending on what price the wine's made at, but maximum $500 per ton.
Yeah.
So the differential there is, for both agricultural products, is perverse and irrational.
Yeah, we both sat on the Australian Distillers Association committee there for a few years. And I fondly remember Spike, obviously, rest his soul, jumping up and down about the New Zealanders getting $150 million relief on the wine equalisation tax. We could talk about that one for hours, how unfair it is in our industry. But let's keep moving on with the journey. So after you hit that financial, you pretty much launched the product onto market February 2013. Later in the year, really felt the pinch with cash flow. So talks about the next chapter. What happened next?
Oh, it was the benevolence of our distributor and investors that had kind of, believed in the idea that we didn't go to the wall. But for about 18 months more, let me think, from February 2013, I think I can say that the statute of limitations have passed now. From February 2013 to January 2015, I was basically 30 days away from insolvency every day.
Yeah, geez.
And so launching a product, really kind of slogging it out to get that product to market and maintain that price point and keep the team together, continue to make whiskey, build the brand. Our third child was born June 2013, so that was all through that period of time. Newborn kid at home, so it was pretty stressful, to say the least.
Well, Finn, your first child would have come on the scene just as you launched in 2007.
Yeah, so Finn was born 2007 when I had that fuck it moment and we're going to start a distillery. Isla was born when we turned the stills on, and Mary was born when we launched.
Yep.
So I had to have a chat to Holly before we started exporting to say we want to stop these company milestones correlating to births.
Yep.
I've got a few more milestones planned, and I don't think we can afford any more kids.
Yeah. Well, it seems a very common theme. John Groom I interviewed last week, it's a similar story. He got married a year later, started the business. A year later, first child turned up. A year later, the GFC hit, and then 2 more kids later. And it's just like, it was an absolute train wreck of, big life moments. Great with kids coming along, but obviously starting a business at the best of times is hard. You don't also need the layer over top of that, the big GFC.
Yeah, the GFC, and also, whiskey's, a lot retail, but also a lot in hospitality, particularly given the vision we had for the brand that, every self-respecting restaurant and bar in Australia should have a bottle of Starward on its back bar. Like, we needed to get out there and tell that story. And that's not a 9-to-5 conversation. So it was very taxing, but by the end of 2014, it really became a crunch point. Like, I tested the patience of our investors. We genuinely were down to running on vapor. And actually, Rambo forwarded me an expression of interest email for Distill Ventures.
Oh, no way. You're shitting me. So he's going to take the credit for Distilled Ventures.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, right? Because I filled out the expression of interest form. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yep.
I don't know, 150 words max.
Wow.
Pretty cursory. Not really thinking anything would come of it, but I thought this is exactly what we need. And then 4 days later, I get this call from someone saying, "Hi, we're just doing a survey of Australian distilleries on behalf of a UK company called Distill Ventures. Have you heard of them?" I was like, "Yeah, I just filled out this expression of interest."
Yeah.
So he can take half the credit because they were looking and we were looking at the same time.
We don't want to give him too much credit.
Not too much.
And for the audience, Distilled Ventures are a subsidiary, correct me if I'm wrong, David, of Diageo, which is one of the probably top 3 or 5 alcohol companies in the world. I think you told me a few years ago when we were
we'll rewind this bit.
Yep.
So Distill Ventures is the world's first alcohol accelerator program.
Yep.
It's independently owned by 2 guys and the team, and they have a single investor, which is Diageo.
Got it.
And Diageo is the largest spirits producer in the Western world. I think there are some in India and China that.
And I think you told me a few years ago as we were walking to the cafe around the corner from Starward that they've got like 18,000 sales reps around the world.
In the United States.
Oh, just the US, Diageo. Yeah. Wow. Okay, they are big then. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and have the Diageo House of Whiskies is one of the most revered whiskey collections in the world. So to be a part of that, and so Distill Ventures felt like a really good fit for Starward on a few levels.
Yeah.
First is that they back founders. They're not private equity in the traditional sense of like trying to get flip things out.
Yes.
It was the investor was completely aligned and understood the challenges of building brands. And the third thing is that the team themselves were founders and understood high growth startup. So you not only had access to capital and a partner that was patient and understood the challenges of building brands, but also within the Distill Ventures team, entrepreneurs themselves that, I can't tell you how many times I've lent on in sort of trying to get this, mission to Mars off the ground.
I think you said to me once, they've got like nearly 100 PhDs on the payroll at Diageo that you can just, you can lean on if you need, whether it's marketing or some technical experience.
Yeah, and
great.
The way I describe it, Troy, is like a tape measure. Like they are a great investor in terms of being at our disposal if we need their support, technical support on infrastructure upgrades, because you can't just click and drag a spreadsheet when you're scaling up the volumes that we are and expect the product to look like it does, now by doing that. So that's been, really helpful in terms of identifying, where we're going to fall into strife. But more recently, and certainly in the context of the United States, they're a separate business. Technically, they're our competitor, but just in terms of broad market insights, the stuff that we have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get access to, through research or getting consultants to help us, we're able to kind of see, get some insights into. So, and look, it's readily available stuff, but it's just kind of nice having somebody else, prove that point for you.
And Distill Ventures, what's their count now? About, is it either side of 10 distilleries around the world they've invested in?
I don't know the official number, but it'd be more than that.
Yeah, right. That's great. It's a
I'd
really
say
good
there's
model.
Probably 10 in the US, just thinking off the top of my head. So,
yeah, great.
And a lot of these distilleries, for good reason, choose not to be publicly sort of overt about the strategic stake that Distill Ventures or Diageo have in the brand. But we're loud and proud. I mean, for me, it was a defining moment in my career, let alone this business, when we were able to secure the capital to fulfill the vision that I'd had at that point in time for 7 years.
And out of interest, back on the timeline, I guess, so once you filled in that application, you got the phone call a few days later. How long did that take until effectively they were partners in the business with you?
So first visit I had with the team at Distill Ventures was in October, Halloween, 2014.
So April, you put the application in, yep.
No. It would have been like September or so.
Oh, right, okay.
Should fish it out.
Right, so a month later they turned up.
No, I accidentally, on purpose, made a trip to the UK to find a distributor and said, why don't I pop in and say hello?
Got it.
We were one of their first 2 whiskey investments. Up until then, they were very much focused on spirits and liqueurs that were faster time to market.
Yeah,
I think that was just both of their prudence in proving that there was a model and a funding model and a need for this, and then obviously the timelines and investment scale for whiskey distilleries. You can quickly add a couple of zeros to the to the investment ask, and so. Timing-wise, we were quite fortunate that they were interested in exploring whiskey at a time that we were very interested in exploring extra capital. And it was great. Like so October, I'd met them face-to-face in London. They had some more administrative things that they needed to deal with coming into December. But by January, they were at the distillery. We had a signed heads of agreement March. And by October that year, we'd done the deal. So it was about 12 months all in all.
That's great. That's really good. And at that time, the distillery was set up at Essendon Airport, not far from Melbourne Airport, Tullamarine. Yep, great. And then what did that mean when the capital came into the business? What happened next? We
were able to scale up quite substantially. So we were running the stills full tilt, but had planned to upgrade the distillery to be able to do about 10 times the volume of that original distillery. And so within about 18 months, we moved the distillery to its current home in Port Melbourne, about a mile from downtown Melbourne. And had a substantial increase in volume, like a 10-fold increase in volume.
Wow.
And then from there, we're just in the process of upgrading again. We're doubling down again.
Great. Wow.
So that was number one. Number two was I didn't have to worry about payroll anymore, Troy.
Great feeling.
And when you don't have to worry about payroll and your decision making becomes far clearer and far more it's not that those other decisions didn't lack integrity, but they're constrained and compromised by the fact that, you've got 2 really shitty decisions to make,
Yep.
So we were able to make decisions that talked about the future, 3, 4, 5 years down the track, not next
3
week.
weeks. Yeah. Yep.
And that's a blessing for a brand, particularly a whiskey brand. And we started to scale up in terms of capability. So we hired a professional CEO. We got over that period of time, we got a marketing director on board. We had, brand ambassadors on the street. And so all of a sudden we started to basically build a brand.
Yeah.
Still in its nascent stages. And, upon reflection, really that capability development was well ahead of what we needed at the time.
Mm. But it's held you in good stead now, I'm assuming.
100%, but it was a luxury, in terms of like when we needed that. I think that it's now starting to pay dividends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we understand, I guess, how to sell the product. One of the benefits of being an incumbent distillery in a home market without really any competitors, particularly at your price point, is that you're the default choice.
Yeah.
So we delivered on our promise. We had amazing liquid. It won awards in San Francisco, best craft distilled spirit in the world.
Wow. Yeah.
Lots of category wins, against other rest of world whiskies. So whiskies not from Scotland, Ireland, or Japan, or the US. And so the accolades were there. We had a compelling price point. We developed a great relationship with our retail partners and hospitality, for that matter. So it was a really straightforward sell-in for people that were looking. But there comes a point at which you start to saturate that market.
Yeah.
And you need to kind of attract people to your brand. And honestly, that didn't really happen for Starward until about 2016.
Right.
Thinking out loud, about 80,000 bottles.
Yeah.
So, with hindsight, how wonderful it is, we could have built an $80,000 well-oiled machine without needing to kind of invest the capital that we did. But it was well ahead of the curve to ensure that now in the United States, founder Dave can be here.
Yes.
Wholeheartedly trusting the decisions that are being made
back in Melbourne.
Both from a product perspective and also from a brand equity point of view and business planning, the whole gamut.
And I should be clear, the reason you're in Seattle is not really for family. That's a big part of it. But for work, on the work sense, you're there really to push the brand into the USA and really get Australian, the Australian whiskey category, I guess, as at the same time, a lot more aware in this massive market. It's the biggest market for whiskey in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, I've got it every day. It's basically getting out of Vuvuzela and kind of shouting from the rooftops that people should start caring about Australian whiskey, because right now, there are no fucks given about Australian whiskey. Let's face it, right? We're very self-congratulatory in our home market, but I can give you the tip that stands for nothing over here. Yeah. So we've got to build relevance. We've got to build, a compelling reason for people to buy, because, you walk into a liquor store like the equivalent of Dan Murphy's, and let's just say there's 30 feet of whiskey spelt both ways.
Yep.
27 of it's American.
Yeah.
Bourbon, rye, craft American, single malt, right? So I'm fighting for 3 feet of space alongside Scotch, Irish, Japanese,
wow,
and the rest of the world.
Yep.
And no one's giving up their spot for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got to come in all guns blazing and just saying, hey, we're a really good whiskey. It's delicious and well priced, is kind of like saying, I'm going to beat Usain Bolt in the 100-meter dash because I have legs. It's like, well, they're all really important things to have, but it's not the reason why you're going to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you do like a challenge. So trying to crack the US market, good luck. It's fucking tough. We've obviously tried it with New Zealand as well, but you've also got the whole issue around the states are all different. It's all the hangover, no pun intended, of the prohibition or the liquor laws between the states, etc. It looks really attractive.
Genuinely 50 markets. You've got to view it as entering into Europe.
Yes.
Same currency.
Yep.
there is a kind of, union-based legislative structure, but each state has its own laws, culture, and ways of doing business that you need to acclimate to.
So while it looks easy in the business plan or in your spreadsheet, it's the biggest market in the world for whiskey. By the next closest market is France, which is almost exactly half the value of the USA. As you and I both know, it is fucking hard. It's not an easy thing to crack.
No, that's right. So there's complexity at all levels of the value chain. So, effectively, if we just think of ourselves as importers right now, I'm an importer of whiskey. I've got to find myself somebody that will hold my stock for me as an importer, because it's too expensive for us to kind of do that on our own.
Yeah.
That costs money. I then state by state need to engage a distributor to order that stock, and then somehow motivate their sales force to not sell Jameson, right, which falls off the truck. It's so easy to sell, right? Everybody needs that in their bar, and buy some Starward Twofold or Nova, and it's tough. These guys are very, very, very good at understanding what's most of them are commission based, highly unionized workforce. So they're good at understanding what's going to get them their commission check at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And, the challenge is, even if I threw them lots of money based on performance, we can't perform because we don't have any awareness. So there's all of these bits of, it needs to be a 360 approach to brand building and sales, with a really laser focused commercial plan behind it that's going to excite. Not only, like typically we'd like, well, how do we excite the consumer and how do we excite the decision maker at the bar or at the bottle shop? You've got to excite a distributor as well.
It sounds like you're going through another, or a new chapter, I should say, of exciting learning, because I know you love a challenge, but this is entirely something new that you've got to get your teeth into and really understand and crack that nut so it will work.
Yeah, and it is really very fulfilling from that perspective. I think that you can only do it on the ground. I've got a good mate of mine who's trying to do it remotely and spends a lot of time in the air.
Yeah.
But you really need to be on the ground, because there's for a few reasons. The first is it's all relationship management at that distributor level.
Yep. So
it's very much that B2B engagement, that building relationships for the long term. It means a lot to them to know that a founder of an Australian brand has committed himself to situating himself in the US market. But equally as important, if not more, is we can be agile, right? Like if opportunities present themselves, if we need to make a hard decision, we can do that far more effectively with me on the ground here, getting insights and understanding them being 14,000 miles away.
Absolutely. Well, just to round out the journey so far, I guess, and get us past question 3. So you moved about a year ago over to the USA to really push expansion. New CEO Simon came into the role late last year as well, and that pretty much brings us up to date now. And you maybe quickly touch on that. The first CEO, Andrew, when he decided to leave last year, and you're looking for a new CEO, you decided to change what was needed for the focus of the business. Is that right?
Yeah, I think what was needed in that first 5-year period was really somebody that understood what it meant to scale up a business operationally.
Yeah, and that's very much Andrew. Yeah.
And if you think of the operations of the business, given the way that whiskey is made and it takes time, we scaled up all of our sales efforts that we're thinking about now 4 years ago in production.
Right.
So in that regard, the big shift needed to be moving from maker's world into drinker's world.
Yep. Right.
And putting the customer first in terms of decision making, as opposed to thinking about operations and the impact that it would have from that perspective.
Yeah. Right.
Because, there's this a very healthy tension between production, and I'm sure it's the same in every business in the world, between production and sales.
Yeah.
Particularly one where, we're still learning. We continue to innovate. It's part of our ethos to really challenge the status quo and, continue to really challenge what people can expect from Australian whiskey. And that should be consumer-led. But, we've got into such a great groove with these two amazing whiskies. Why would we need another one? Or what's the rationale for doing that? Because it just adds complexity. So there's a healthy tension there. And the great thing about Simon is, his background is in brand building. He's worked for Treasury and its predecessors for over 20 years.
Treasury Wine Estates, who own Penfolds and other great Australian wines. And was he Chief Marketing Officer there? So
Chief Marketing Officer and also the Managing Director of the US business.
Wow, there you go. That's a great find.
It's just like, and built 19 Crimes over here to be quite a substantial brand.
Wine brand, yeah. Wow, okay. Didn't know that.
So, and it took them 3 times to do that. But, they're all learnings that we can kind of apply into doing it the first time.
Yep.
So, perfect choice.
Right, yeah. Well, that takes us on to question 4 then. Just to give the audience some context of growth, any key numbers you can share over the now 13 years?
So, we've only been selling since 2013.
Yep.
Yeah, first year was 443 cases of whiskey, 6-bottle cases of whiskey.
6-bottle cases, right, wow.
And this year, if I use the same metric, we're on track to doing 20,000 6-bottle cases.
Fantastic. That's amazing. 120,000
We'll see how we go.
Yep.
We might be a little shy, but we'll give it our best shot.
And I know because you really ramped up. What year did you say you moved to Port Melbourne? Was it 2015?
16.
16. So it's only really now, all that stock, you really ramped up things tenfold. That stock's really only now coming online maturation-wise.
February of this year, yeah.
Yep. So you've got a shit ton of stock ready to go. And obviously, which is what you're doing, leading the charge in the US, you've got to, bed that path.
Availability is not a problem.
Yeah. Now it's a sales problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Congratulations. That's phenomenal growth, David. When was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded? This one's a tough one.
I haven't. There's so much to do, Troy. There's so much to master. There have been moments clearly along the way that I felt like we're onto something.
Yeah.
And it's not just my irrational belief. There are others that are equally as irrationally believing in this idea that we can take Australian whiskey to the world.
Yep.
And so those moments are, great senses of validation,
but still trepidation in the back of your mind.
100%. We've got a huge job to do. Like I said, we would break a calculator in terms of percentage. We would be such a big rounding error on the percentage of sales in the United States. It's not even worth.
Yeah.
So the job, we haven't succeeded. We've got a lot of work to do, but there are key moments, like I said, in terms of belief with investors. The first person to write the check was a success, right?
Yep.
Of course, the largest distillery, in the Western world, kind of taking a stake in the business.
That's a success.
Moment of validation, right?
Yeah.
But it was a means to an end. A lot of people early on, it's really funny, Troy. Like when we moved to Port Melbourne, it's beautiful. It's an amazing space. And there's, particularly now being so far away, I miss it so much. And I miss the people, of course, that are in those four walls even more.
Mm-hmm.
But it used to almost frustrate me when people would say, "Oh my goodness, look at this place! You must be so proud." It's like, well, no, actually, I'm more proud that we can go down the road and pick up a bottle in Dan Murphy's for $85,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Or that I'm here in Seattle and go into a whiskey bar and
Yes.
ask someone what's interesting, and they say, "Well, we've got this new Australian whiskey. It's pretty cool."
I guess that's a good next question. What does success look like to you?
I think when Starward's at a point at which it doesn't like it's like giving birth to a child and getting to a point at which you can say, actually, it doesn't it has its own momentum and doesn't require the energy of anybody to stimulate growth, that it has its under its own steam. And that's a measure of success in terms of brand success.
Yep.
I've made a lot of promises to a lot of people from an investment perspective.
Yes.
So delivering on those promises would be a measure of success too.
Yep, that's good.
I think if we kind of think of one of my proudest moments was last year winning the People's Choice Award at Whiskey and Almond, which is a local bar in Melbourne.
Phenomenal bar, probably the best whiskey bar in Australia by my opinion.
I think you're right. And the People's Choice Awards was like no better validation of like having being meaningful to people in your hometown that like their whiskey.
Great.
So basically it was they ran the till off, I think, in October or November and ranked their whiskies 20-1.
Yep.
The top 5 whiskies were then offered in a blind flight, because the difference between 1 and 5 was so tight in terms of the
sales,
finishing order sales. And the drinkers were then asked to rate their favorite 1 to 5 blind.
How many people did they have rating that?
I actually don't know, but it ran for 2 months and it's a busy bar, right?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yep. Right. That would have been thousands, over 1,000 at least then. Yeah.
We won. Up against some amazing Japanese whiskies, Scotch whiskies, American whiskies, Irish whiskies.
That's phenomenal, David. Well done.
So I genuinely mean that. Like, it was one of my proudest moments in this business.
Yeah.
Was winning that award. And we've won some pretty special awards.
Yes.
What does success look like? This is a bit of a segue, but I actually got into financial services when I was at university. I ran the computer lab and used to fill the printers and make sure the computers turned on and plug them into the internet. This is in 1992.
That's when I was at uni. Yes.
So I remember assigning IP addresses to 300 computers in the in the Faculty of Business.
I remember downloading guitar tablature music from the University of Texas, printing them out on these giant A3 printers and taking them back to my dorm room and being so happy.
So
free stuff from the internet. 1992. Yeah.
The computer lab. So Faculty of Business. It had a financial planning degree, and this company had offered free access to their financial planning software. And I was captivated by it because it kind of really spoke to my sort of long-natured mindset.
Yeah.
Like if I wasn't an entrepreneur, I'd probably be a landscape gardener. Sort of like planting something now and seeing what happens in 15, 20 years time. And they had this module in the program called Financial Independence. And what you could do is say, if you wanted to retire at 45 years of age with, $500,000 a year worth of income, how much did you need to save every year between now and then to be able to be financially independent? And what I quickly realized at university was my ideal, which has changed in terms of what I wanted from financial independence, would never be achieved from being in a 9
working for someone else.
job.
Yeah. Yeah, working for someone else. Yeah.
So that was the moment that I decided to that I needed to kind of own a business.
Yeah.
But also it was a moment that because they also had an annuity program, which was the opposite of that. Just basically saying, what's your nest egg today going to give you moving forward? It's like, all right, I need to somehow find a way of making $10 million or whatever the number was.
Yep. Yep.
And so it was like, okay, not only do I need to own a business, I need to be able to sell it for a sizable amount so I don't ever have to work again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a really long-winded way of saying that, if I and my family have options available to us that provide us with the ability to be financially independent, but still maintain, the life that I do right now in terms of the emotional and mental and physical investment that I make to the business, then that's a measure of success too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Still
great.
a way off.
Yep. Absolutely.
But every day's a day closer, mate.
That's right. Exactly. Journey of Journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. I just want to circle back. I often ask the FTE question because it does give a lot of good context. When you started out in 2007, maybe it was 2010 when you had the stills on. Am I correct? It was yourself, Ian, and Hugh were the three started?
No, it was myself, Sam Slaney, and Matt Inchley. So
right.
Ian and Hugh came a little later.
Yeah.
But, there were three of us, and I used to be like the skinniest I've ever been because
it's a dangerous industry, isn't it? And I also sit on a board of a brewery, a craft brewery, so it's equally dangerous. I've just got to make sure I don't take any work, with a chocolate maker or something.
Well, the point I make is I was just working so fucking hard.
Yeah.
I'd get up. Basically, we'd turn the stills on at 6. They automatically switch off at about 5. I'd get there by 6. I'd turn the stills around, and then by about 8 o'clock, because it was at Essendon Airport, it was all against traffic, which was a masterstroke of mine, get into the distillery.
Yep.
And then I'd get home by about 8:30, have breakfast with the kids, have a shower, go back to the distillery, start the day, finish at about 6 o'clock, come home, and then at about 10 o'clock go back to the distillery and turn the stills around again and do the last one of the day.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was hard work. I'm still the only person at the distillery that's done every job.
And so there's 3 FTE started. What, off the top of your head now, would be the FTE across the business?
35.
35? Yeah, great. Yeah. Oh, that's phenomenal growth in effectively 10 years in operation. If it's still started in early 2010, that's 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And funding, we've spoken a bit about that. So you had Bill and Lynn, obviously, were early investors. You've got a handful of other investors somewhere already in the industry that I'm aware of. Then Distilled Ventures came along. Any other funding path you took? Government grants?
Between the no government funding.
Yeah.
Between the October meeting with Distilled Ventures.
Yep.
And the following October dollars landing, there was a round of investors at that point in time.
Got it. Right. So
who were instrumental.
Yep.
Like all of them were, but
yep.
They kind of kept the lights going while we had to go through that due diligence process, which with a dual listed multinational company, for them it wasn't about. It was, for them, reputational risk was a far bigger issue than the financial risk.
Got it.
And I'm not making light of the investment, but that's their reputation is everything.
So that was between October 2014 and October 2015 when Distilled Ventures funds came in. Yeah, great. So you didn't entertain or look at a cask or barrel investment program like you had instigated at Lark?
Oh, no. We had that from 2009 through to 2014.
Sorry, yeah, that's right. 2009 through 2014, yeah. And you got out of that just in time, I think, because the whole Nant fiasco started stirring up around then, 2015, 16, something like that?
That's right, yeah. Look, and more importantly, it's a really novel way to fund a business at that startup phase.
And it's been common in Scotland, hasn't it, that model as well?
Yeah. But once you start to get to the point at which you're starting to be, commercially viable, you should be thinking about more traditional forms of debt.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a red flag if businesses, I guess, are mature and needing the barrel program to fund their business, because it sort of talks to the fact that they're looking at how can I put it, grassroots level investment when they should be thinking about corporate investment.
Yep. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry? If not, why, and what else would you do?
Yes, I would. With hindsight, or the person I was then?
With hindsight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Crush it.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be a very different business.
Yes.
Very, very different.
Oh, mate, if I had my time again, I think I've been involved in 20 businesses over 20 years. If I had my time again, my God, things I would do differently. Yeah. Can you outline the most stressful point in the small business growth journey so far, so our audience can learn from it?
I think that 2012, my dad passed away. 2013, we had a baby. I launched the brand. By the end of 2013, it was like touch and go as to whether we'd kind of keep going or not.
Yeah.
And then it was really only until the end of 2014 whether I knew we had a possibility of succeeding.
Yeah.
And then, I had to get that bridging round of capital over the line.
Yeah.
That was one of the most stressful times of my life.
Yeah. So
Christmas 2014.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, such fast growth and big vision and plans. Funding would be a big part of that need and stress.
Yeah.
And what areas in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
I feel like I get in the way of a lot of good decisions, Troy.
I've never heard anyone put it like that before, but yeah.
Like as founder, you're employee number one, right?
Yeah.
And by default, you're always letting go. So it sounds silly, but my role is 1/35 of what it used to be.
Yes. Yeah.
Not quite, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
And so you need to recruit the right people. That's a fundamental.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
Recruiting the right people is the best way to add value to your business. But you've also got to let them do their job and not second guess them and, get out of the way.
Yep.
I think that when I'm at my best, I've worked on ways of making sure that, not that I'm heard, that's like just lip service and placation, that actually I'm championing the brand and what it stands for, and therefore the decisions that others will make will be based off that.
Yep.
That's the way that I've added the most amount of value.
Yep. Okay.
Because then it's not a matter of like, what would Dave think? It's not. It's irrelevant.
Yep. And what have you enjoyed least about managing the fast growth?
Cash flow.
What was it?
Managing cash flow.
Oh, managing cash flow.
Yeah, I mean, notwithstanding we've had investors that have been extremely kind of generous and patient.
Yep.
All through this story from 2007 to today, we've still got milestones to hit. We've still got performance hurdles to kind of chase, and we still have to deliver on what we said we were going to do, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just an endless pot of money. So we have to kind of within that construct make decisions that are hard,
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that decision making, that's the other thing that like it's taken me a long time to get to a point at which I've got a really solid framework for making decisions or having others make them and me feel comfortable with them.
Yep.
It took longer than it needed to.
Yep. And what has been the biggest mindset shift for you in the small business growth journey?
you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes. My
and
thinking on that certainly changed as well. Yes.
you don't have all the answers. That even though you might know how to do something, paying someone else to do it only, at worst, simply validates that you know how to do it.
Yep.
But at best, could identify a better way or more, fruitful way of kind of creating value.
Yep. Yep. The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Meditation.
Meditation, did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, very good. How long have you been doing that for, into that?
4 months, beginning
Yep.
of this year.
Great. Yeah.
Transformational.
Yeah. How long each
People
day?
can tell. Like, I can be on a call and not say anything, and that's probably one big tell.
Yeah.
No, but they can just see it in my face.
Yep.
14,000 miles away. Like, I get Slack messages on the call. Did you meditate just before this?
It's great. Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success, then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com. Now, can you talk about how you added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Wins. I mean, employee number one, officially number one, Sam Slaney, was a huge win.
Yep.
He is our head of production. There's no one that I trust more at the distillery to kind of implement like the vision for what Starward can be from a liquid perspective.
So Sam's still there, is he?
Yep.
And when did he start? What year was that?
He started in June 2009.
Wow. So 11 years, next couple of months. Yeah.
He had a break for about 18 months.
Yeah.
And then he needed to scratch his microbrewery itch.
Right.
Which is probably what I'll do next to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
And then came back, and I felt like the Earth's axis shifted back into place, and I haven't looked back since. Yeah.
What about?
So that was an amazing recruit.
Yeah.
Because Sam is not me.
Yeah.
He has a huge amount of respect for me, but also has the ability to call me on my bullshit. And you need that.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I think he was a little bit more developed in his whiskey journey, but not much more.
Yep.
So we came out as students to the category, as opposed to this is the way it's done.
Yep. And what about any mistakes or lessons learned over, you got 35?
Look, I think so. I'm gonna do three key lessons. The first is you have to be absolutely clear on what the role is that you want filled.
Yes.
And particularly if it's something that you've been doing yourself and that someone else has to do for you. There's nothing worse than selling somebody a position that's just basically all of the shitty bits that you don't want to do.
Yep.
Unless that's their ninja quality, which it might well be, right?
Yeah.
But just clarity and focus on what the role looks like is such an important part of recruitment. And thinking, can this person grow into the role?
Yep.
Right. You don't want them growing out of it.
Yep.
Like, the role's bigger than them.
Yep.
And I think the second one is just in terms of, it is that trust issue, isn't it? Like that we talked about early on. Like you need to be able to trust the people that are doing the job can do the job, but act swiftly if they're not. You know, and that's kind of like age-old advice.
Hire slow, fire fast. Yeah.
And I think the third one is like invest ahead of the curve. Like it really has set us up for success. Being able to do that. I really suffered in the first 12 months hiring slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the US, that is, and it really had it slowed us down.
Yeah.
It was the right decision in the end, but because it was going to be my my new employee number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we should have been on top of that a long time before I arrived.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And what are some things you recommend to building and sustaining a kick-ass culture?
It's a really difficult one to assess for before recruitment, but it should be part of that first 60 days, right? And they need to be connected to your vision. They can't just be turning up.
Yeah, for a paycheck.
And even if they're a very good worker and do a diligent job, if they don't get why it's important that we do this work, that it's only us that can do it, then there's always going to be a disconnect.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So building belief in the vision is a critical element of like an amazing culture.
Yep. Yep.
And it's incumbent on you, like you're it.
Yeah. I recall you telling me about your quarterly team meetings. You'd sit down, you'd talk about how the last quarter's gone, numbers-wise, strategy, talk about the next quarter, where we're going. It was very inclusive with the team, transparent, sharing numbers, but also I think you told me you had the continuous improvement initiative. So one team would get up every quarter and present one thing that they think needs to change in the business or a project they've just undertaken.
Yeah. We're really fortunate in that, it sounds terrible, but like Toyota closed down their plant literally a couple of kilometers down the road from where the distillery is.
Yeah.
And we're able to recruit both some consultants in the early days to help us with our continuous improvement program.
Yeah.
But also then...
That's pretty much where it came from. It was Toyota in the 50s, 60s and 70s, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Mindset, yeah.
100%. And then our sort of like head of one of Sam's direct reports that leads the production team really inculcated that mindset of continuous improvement every day. It's not a let's project for the quarter kind of thing, but every day.
Yep.
In everything that we do, in every work stream, let's identify ways in which we can make it better.
Yeah, that's great.
Look, the thing about that is you need to have a trusting and open dialogue with the team.
Yeah.
They need to know that they're being heard.
Yeah.
And you need to have a commitment to making a difference.
And I think the other part of that you told me was also launching the mental health focus as well.
Yeah, so sustainability is really important to us. I mean, one of our core values is we care. There are only 4. And kind of, if we're called Starward and we don't have reach Starward as one of our values, then we're kind of missing a trick.
Yeah. Make
great ideas grow, deliver with integrity and care.
Yep. Great.
That's it, right? Mm-hmm. And so the care value, it's a beautiful thing actually, because it covers so much. It's like, was this bit of collateral that we developed made with care? Did the person, was it thoughtful? Did they kind of think about the end consumer when it was made, right?
Yep.
But more literally, it's like, how are you going? Are you okay? What can we do to serve our community, both in terms of hospitality, which is really relevant right now, and over here last week we fed 1,500 people in Chicago, and we'll run that out for another 8 weeks. So it's pretty important for us to kind of look after the community that's looking after us.
Yeah, great.
The bushfire appeals, we raised over $40,000 in the United States to kind of support the World Wildlife Fund. These are things that like just what good people do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that helps attract and keep people on your team as well.
Absolutely agree with that. Yeah, definitely. Yep. Let's talk about professional development. Did you invest much in yourself over the years?
I was really fortunate, Troy, that when I had my previous business, which was, believe it or not, in e-learning,
Yep.
And every fucking day my kids log into this piece of shit Google Classrooms and
Yeah.
Blackboards. I think, what the hell was I thinking selling that business
Yes.
15 years ago?
Yep.
Jesus. Anyway, e-learning.
Yes.
Ahead of my time.
You were.
I'm telling you now, in 30 years' time, Australian whiskey is going to be a thing, right?
Yeah.
I was really lucky that the Victorian government, through the VECI, the Victorian Economic Chamber of Commerce and Industry, sponsored me to go to UC Berkeley for a semester to do a high growth startup course that basically private equity firms send their interns and staff to kind of learn basically venture capital to deal flow was the name of the course.
Yep.
So you understood everything about the mechanics of getting a deal over the line, but also what high growth really is in the context of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
What what payback those companies are looking for.
Yep.
And the notion of sustainable competitive advantage and building an economic moat around your business. Those were the kind of terms that really came to the fore, and I finally understood after having done that course. That was in 2002, and pretty much after that, I came back and realized that despite the situation we find ourselves in now, that my heart wasn't in e-learning, that I couldn't kind of stick it out to this time frame. And at that point in time, it was all about content development, not really the platform to deliver the content. And so with that course, if it wasn't for that course, we wouldn't be drinking Starward whiskey now.
Yeah, that's great. What about other professional development apart from that course, which sounds like a phenomenal learning opportunity and value? Ongoing reading, events.
I'm a voracious reader. So Jim Collins, obviously, Good to Great.
Love Jim Collins.
Vern Harnish, I'm a big fan of Vern Harnish.
Yep, Vern Harnish.
Scaling
the growth guy,
Yep. And more recently starting to get into a little bit more like creative arts and understanding a bit more about creativity at scale.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
So like I'm really keen in understanding how, for example, good movies are made, quality movies are made.
Yeah, great. What about mentors and coaches? Obviously, Bill Lark was a mentor along the way. Any other coaches or mentors you've had help out?
So Bill was great, and early on, like I said, he really taught. I got a lesson in Scotch whiskey from Bill. I really understood Scotch whiskey, and for anybody that's met Bill and his mates, I also understood what a Scotch whiskey drinker looked like. And what, like, with the greatest of respect, what I learned from Bill was that they're not my audience.
Yes.
That what I was trying to do would be at best a curiosity, and if we crafted a quality whiskey, that they would acknowledge it as that. But for them, there's nothing that beats Ardbeg from the 1970s, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, like, not only are they rusted on Scotch drinkers, but they're rusted on Scotch drinkers from whiskies from a yesteryear that aren't made anymore, right?
Well, I think you've really struck a few solid timelines, David. I know there's been some shit along the way with the GFC, et cetera, but 2013, late 2013, when I started at Lark, actually, I remember reading this article. That was the year that the demographic really moved from 65 plus as the key or the biggest whiskey drinkers in Australia, at least, but it was reflected around the world, to the 25 to 34-year-old age bracket. And they call that the Mad Men effect, because the TV series Mad Men were drinking a lot of whiskey from like 11 in the morning in the advertising industry in the 50s. So I think it's another good alignment of, or even luck, I think, of just timing there.
Yeah, there was signs there, but I was my test case.
Yeah.
If I kind of captivated by single malt whiskies and whiskies that like have all of this growing up, whiskey for me, mate, was Johnny Walker was what my Greek friends' dads drank when they were playing cards.
Yep.
right, until all hours of the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And Shivers Regal was what we gave
For
our
birthdays.
accountant for Christmas.
Right. Yep.
That's it. That's all I knew
Yep.
of whiskey.
Yeah.
So, that first moment walking into the distillery bar and on the Hobart's waterfront and seeing, I don't know, at that point, it was probably 200 bottles then, right?
At the Lark Bar?
Yeah, it was just like, where is this being? What is this? I can't believe it. And then I just thought, well, if I think this way,
Wow.
then
Yeah.
surely others will too. That was number one. But then I tested it when I got myself a job working with them. Bill's masterstroke was offering the Tasmanian Tourism Information Bureau access to the bathrooms because they didn't have any toilets
next door.
And so, people would walk in and they'd have the same reaction I did. It's like, what on earth is this place?
Yeah.
Give me a minute. I just need to splash the boots, using Bill's terms. and then they'd come back out and it'd be like shooting fish in a barrel. Like they'd walk out with 3 or 4 bottles of whiskey. And so for me, it was like, okay, there's something going on here.
Yep. Yep.
This is not whiskey's not just for whiskey drinkers. It sounds silly, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. It was the right product at the right time.
Yep. Great. Any other mentors or coaches?
So I've got a coach now in the United States.
Great. Yep.
He's great. Really ex-military, ex-Microsoft. So really interesting career.
Yep.
Senior level at Microsoft. So the great thing for me is that I've got somebody that I can relate to on a tech basis.
Yes.
He's extremely discipline oriented, like in terms of rhythm and routine.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which I need because my ADHD mind kind of wanders at the next time. And but also he's been coaching for 20 odd years, so he's got a huge and diverse range of businesses that he's worked with in the past. So there's nothing he hasn't seen before. I mean, whiskey's novel to him.
Yep. Great.
It's never about whiskey.
Yep.
That's, I've got mentors at Distill Ventures for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this has really been about clarity and focus, stakeholder, managing relationships with key stakeholders at these distributors and making sure that I'm on my game from that perspective, building out a team for the second time in the same business, I guess, from zero.
Yep.
And obviously taking with me the learnings that I've had along the way, but also understanding that I'm new to the American market. And so motivating and inspiring people here is very different to motivating and inspiring Australians.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
It comes naturally to me. I think this kind of audacious vision we have for like an iconic whiskey that comes from Australia's fits right up a US mindset's mind. You know?
Yeah. Yes.
And let's face it, if anyone's going to take it up to Scotch and bourbon, it naturally has to be an Australian whiskey. Right? Like
I humbly agree with that.
Africa or like, you know what I mean? Like it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get on to the final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Letting go.
Yep. Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Good to Great.
Jim Collins, love that book. That was the first one, wasn't it? No, Built to Last was his first one.
Yeah. Both of those are great.
They are awesome books. Awesome books. Any great podcasts or online learning tools, no pun intended, you would use for your own professional development?
It sounds weird, but I listen to The Moment by Brian Koppelman. He's the showrunner for Billions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I learn more about that in terms of like leadership and work ethic than I have from any other book that I read.
Great. I'm going to listen to that. How long are the casts out of interest?
About an hour.
Yep. Okay.
And so The Moment is, like he kind of peels away at the moment at which somebody realizes that they've found what they're going to do for the rest of their lives.
Oh, great. I'm definitely...
Typically in the creative sphere, right?
Yep. And one tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
the challenge with small business, and this is kind of coming from probably the most instrumental business book I've read, is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Oh, yes. That
1996, I reckon I read that.
Yep.
And it was such a gift. It really was, because it kind of made me realize that, those three almost like
entrepreneur, manager, technician
roles, right? You have in a business.
Yep.
You need to pick the one, you need to know what your strengths are and pick that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the best tool in the business is the two other roles.
Yep.
So if you are the entrepreneur, you need the technician and you need a manager.
Definitely, yeah. I got that book.
If you're a manager, you need somebody to light a fire under your ass and get you out of bed every day with something that's going to get you. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, to
it's
me,
a great
that
book.
It is a great book.
It's the first book I get asked for advice a lot, and I say read that book first, whether you're starting out or starting your growth path. Read that book. I think a business partner of mine, we had a fruit and vegetable delivery business in Melbourne online, and I think my Greek business partner there, we were talking about business books, and said, I'll give you my favourite book and we'll swap. And he gave me the E-Myth, and I just was floored. And I apologise for whatever the book was I gave him, because it was nowhere near the quality of the calibre of learning that I did by reading that book. I just reading it made so much sense. But as that old saying goes, common sense, not always common practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the other thing, I wonder, Troy, like I never did like a management consulting kind of stint, and the disciplines you learn in being accountable to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Are really, really important, I think, in terms of like setting yourself up, particularly when you're working autonomously.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I've done it through brute force and like almost like necessity. I have to do it.
Yeah.
And it sounds really mundane, but like, just having rhythm and routine and a system of managing your time is probably the best tool you can invest in.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. And last and final question, what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Keep going. Like it's gonna take a lot longer than you think, but you should still do it.
I've said this a few times, and I probably recounted it to you in London last October when we were there. Probably the Churchill Arms, my favourite pub in London, one of my top three anyway. Best pub Thai in the UK. But the 4x2 rule, have you heard that?
No.
I was actually when I was living in London, heard a VC or an investment banker recount this story, that he would say to people pitching for his money for investment, he would say the 4x2 rule, it's going to take 4 times as long and cost twice as much, or take twice as long and cost 4 times as much as what you think. The only difference is you get to choose.
Huh.
And I found that to be very true in my business journey and the people I speak with as well. There's not many people I've spoken with.
Yeah, I'm on track for the 4 times as long.
Yeah.
But probably 4 times as much as well. But don't tell our shareholder that.
Yeah, great. Awesome, mate. Always great to catch up and talk. Pity we are not sitting in a bar in Paris at 2 a.m. drinking whiskey this time. That was a long drive to the airport, but thank you very much. I think the audience get a shitload of value out of our discussion today and what you've shared with us. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. And can't wait to catch up face to face soon.
Great. Thanks, mate. That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.